Suspicion arises, the Council in chaos. The Galactic Council Chamber, an architectural marvel of glass and shimmering alloys, was filled with the hum of voices raised in frustration and accusation. High Counselor Vexitara, seated at the apex of the semicircular hall, struggled to maintain a semblance of order as the cacophony grew louder. The Council Chamber, usually a place of calculated debate and serene diplomacy, now buzzed with an uncharacteristic tension. Vexitara, with her emerald green skin and piercing silver eyes, tapped the control panel embedded in her armrest. The sound of the council's signal chime rang through the air, a sharp, clarion call meant to demand silence. Yet the voices persisted, driven by a wave of suspicion that had taken root over the past few cycles. "It's a manipulation tactic," bellowed Ambassador Zath of the Krill, his four eyes narrowing into a scowl. The Krill, a warlike species with a harsh rasp to their speech, had always viewed humans with a mix of disdain and wariness. The humans are hiding their true abilities, playing a game of deceit. Beside him, the elegant and slender figure of Envoy Siler of the Sarians raised a calming hand. "Perhaps there is another explanation," Siler suggested, her voice melodic and serene. "We mustn't leap to conclusions." But Zatha's anger was not easily quelled. He slammed his segmented fist onto the table, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. "Explain this, then. For the past decade, humans have entered our most prestigious competitions, sports, engineering, intellectual challenges, and every single time, they place second or third. Never first, never last, always just below the top. It's not coincidence, it's a pattern." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Representatives from the avian-like Yellerin, the reptilian Drex, and the gelatinous MXYL all exchanged wary glances. The evidence was hard to ignore. Human athletes narrowly lost races, scholars stumbled on the final questions, and engineers fell short of the most groundbreaking innovations by a fraction. Yet, no one could deny the skill and intelligence on display. It was as if the humans were capable of winning, but chose not to. Vexitara leaned forward, her voice calm, yet commanding. "Ambassadors, I understand your concerns. The pattern is indeed unusual, but we must approach this matter with reason, not accusation." Her eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on the representatives from Earth, who sat quietly, their expressions carefully neutral. "The Council must vote," she continued, "on whether to initiate a formal investigation. We cannot afford to let this mystery fester. It breeds distrust among our member species." After a moment of tense silence, the holographic voting display lit up, revealing a narrow majority in favor of the investigation. Vexitara nodded, unsurprised. "Then it is decided. I appoint Chief Inspector Ken, known for his impartiality, and Security Director KNX Trell, whose analytical prowess is beyond question." The AI director's glowing, holographic form flickered into a bow of acknowledgement. Inspector Ken, a stern-faced human in a dark uniform, simply nodded. "As of now, this council is adjourned," Vexitara declared, her tone final. The chamber fell into a low murmur as representatives filed out, some casting suspicious glances at the human delegation. The intrigue was palpable, a mystery left dangling in the air like the hum of a disrupted frequency. The stage was set for a deeper dive into the strange behavior of humanity, a question that loomed like a shadow over the Galactic Union. Digging for the truth, the investigation begins. Chief Inspector Ken and Security Director KNX Trell began their investigation with the methodical precision expected of such a high-stakes inquiry. The two made an unlikely pair. Ken, a seasoned human with sharp features and a cool, analytical mind honed by decades of experience, and KNX Trell, an AI entity, projected as a shimmering, semi-transparent hologram with a calm, logical demeanor. Together, they set out to interview a wide range of human participants, athletes, scientists, engineers, and workers, whose performances had all ended in near victories. Their first stop was the Galactic Chess Tournament Hall, where they met Sophia Liu, a human grandmaster who had been poised to win her match until an unexpected blunder on the final move. Ken leaned forward, studying her expression as she recounted the incident. "I don't know what happened," Sophia admitted, her voice tinged with confusion. "I saw the winning move. It was obvious. But at the last second, I moved my rook instead of my queen. It was as if I just decided not to win." Ken exchanged a glance with Trell, who recorded her response with the precision of a supercomputer. "Did you feel pressured?" Ken asked. "Perhaps intimidated by your opponent?" Sophia shook her head. "No, quite the opposite. I felt calm, almost too calm, like I didn't want to take away their chance at victory." Leaving the tournament hall, Ken and Trell moved on to interview engineers from the recent Galactic Innovation Challenge. One human participant, a robotics specialist named Carlos, described how he had chosen to use a slightly outdated AI framework in his project. The decision, he admitted, had puzzled even his own team. "I could have used the latest algorithms," Carlos said, rubbing the back of his neck. But the judges were from the Drek species, and they're known for their conservative approach to technology. "I thought using something more familiar might appeal to them." Trell's holographic form flickered slightly, a sign that its processing systems were working overtime. "You intentionally limited your design?" the AI inquired, its tone neutral but probing. Carlos hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I guess I did. I didn't want them to feel outclassed." As the interviews continued, the pattern became clearer. Small, seemingly insignificant mistakes, unforced errors, and deliberate choices that held back human achievements. It wasn't just one field. It spanned across every major competition, from sports to scientific challenges. Yet the motive remained elusive, a puzzle with a missing piece. Back at their analysis center, Trell pulled up decades of competition records, casting the data across a massive holographic display. The timeline showed a clear inflection point. The trend of human underperformance began shortly after humanity was officially welcomed into the Galactic Union. Trell's logic processors buzzed. "Inspector Ken," the AI declared, "I hypothesize that this could be a coordinated effort at political manipulation. Humans may be downplaying their abilities to gain an advantage in other, unseen ways. Perhaps espionage?" Ken frowned, staring at the glowing lines of data. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something that couldn't be quantified by algorithms. "Maybe," he said slowly, "but if it's espionage, it's the strangest kind I've ever seen. This doesn't feel like a power play. It feels personal." Trell tilted its holographic head, a gesture mimicking curiosity. "Personal? Explain." Ken sighed, folding his arms. "I think it's emotional. Humans are social creatures, driven by empathy and connection. What if there's something deeper motivating them? Something we're not seeing?" The AI hesitated, its logic circuit struggling to process the idea. "Empathy is an irrational factor," Trell remarked. "It is difficult to quantify, which is why we need to go beyond the data," Ken replied. "We need to talk to those who were there at the beginning, human diplomats who helped forge the alliance. They might have answers we can't find in the records." The two investigators exchanged a silent agreement, setting their course for the human embassy. The mystery was deepening, and with each new piece of evidence, the motives behind humanity's actions seemed more complex, more profound than mere manipulation. Whatever the truth was, it lay buried in the past, waiting to be unearthed. The heart of the matter, humanity's compassionate strategy. The private chamber of the human embassy was quiet, a stark contrast to the clamor of the Galactic Council's main hall. Chief Inspector Ken and Security Director KNX Trell were seated across from a group of senior human diplomats. Among them was Ambassador Lin, a silver-haired woman with a calm, unflinching gaze. She had been one of the first diplomats to broker humanity's entry into the Galactic Union. As she looked at the two investigators, there was an air of anticipation, almost relief, as if this moment had been a long time coming. Ken wasted no time. "We've uncovered a pattern," he began. "Humans have been consistently underperforming by narrow margins for years. We need to know why." Ambassador Lin exchanged a glance with her colleagues, who nodded in silent agreement. "You've done well to notice," she said softly. "It's a secret we've kept for decades, not out of deception, but out of necessity." Ken leaned forward, intrigued, while Trell's holographic form flickered as it adjusted its processing focus. "Explain," Trell stated, its tone devoid of emotion. though Ken knew the AI was eager for clarity. Lin took a deep breath. When humanity first joined the Union, we were the newcomers, the unknown element in a delicate balance of power. We quickly realized that if we pushed for victory in every field, sports, technology, academia, we'd risk alienating other species. Many of them were struggling to adapt to our sudden presence, feeling threatened by our competitiveness. She paused, her expression softening as she recalled those early years. We faced a choice: compete at our fullest and risk fostering resentment, or hold back, let others win, and create a space where everyone could feel valued. The room fell silent. Ken absorbed her words, feeling the weight of the decision they had made. "You're saying this was intentional?" he asked quietly. "Humans chose to lose on purpose?" Lin nodded. "Not lose, Inspector. We didn't throw competitions outright. That would have been obvious and patronizing. Instead, we aimed for second place, for just below the top. We made tiny, almost imperceptible errors. A runner might slow by a fraction of a second. A scientist might omit the latest data. An engineer might use a slightly outdated design. It wasn't out of arrogance or pity. It was out of empathy." Trell's holographic form glitched slightly, the AI clearly struggling to process this revelation. "Empathy as a strategic choice?" Trell's voice sounded almost disbelieving. "To intentionally underperform defies logical competitive behavior. It could be interpreted as manipulation." Lin gave a sad smile. "It's not manipulation if the goal is unity." We saw the joy on the faces of the Drex when their young athletes won for the first time, the pride of the Sarians when their scholars triumphed in debate. These moments were worth the sacrifice. They brought us closer together as a union. Ken felt a swell of pride mingled with a twinge of sadness. The diplomat strategy had required humanity to suppress its natural instinct to excel, to stand out, for the sake of building trust. It was a burden few would ever realize, a sacrifice made in silence. "It must have been difficult," Ken said, his voice low, filled with empathy. "Knowing we could have done more, but choosing not to." Ambassador Lin's gaze softened. "Yes, it was, but we believed it was the right path. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about building something greater than ourselves. A shared future." Trell remained silent for a long moment, its processors humming audibly. "This strategy is beyond my calculations," it finally admitted. "It is illogical, yet effective. A paradox of intentional restraint for collective gain." Ken placed a hand on the table, the gesture almost paternal. "It's called compassion, Trell," he said gently. "Sometimes the greatest strength lies in knowing when not to use it." The AI tilted its head, as if attempting to understand this alien concept. "Compassion is strategy," Trell repeated, its voice softer, almost contemplative. "It challenges every model of galactic politics I have processed." Ken nodded. "And that's why it worked?" As they stood to leave, Ken looked back at the diplomats. "You know this won't be an easy truth for the Council to hear," he warned. "Many will feel insulted, others grateful. But it will force everyone to look at themselves differently." Ambassador Lin met his eyes with a steady gaze. "We know, but it's time they understood why we did what we did. It's time for the truth." With that, Ken and Trell left the embassy, their next destination clear: the council chamber, where the storm of revelation awaited. The truth they now carried was a heavy one, but it was also a beacon of hope. Proof that sometimes winning isn't about standing on the podium, but about the bonds forged in shared struggle. The fallout, a divisive revelation. The Galactic Council chamber was packed, its atmosphere thick with tension. High Counselor Vexitara stood at the center, her expression unreadable as Chief Inspector Ken and Security Director Ken X. Trell took their places. Representatives from every major species were present, their eyes fixed on the pair. Ken could feel the weight of the moment. Decades of quiet sacrifice, about to be revealed in a single, decisive report. Vexitara nodded at Ken, signaling him to begin. He cleared his throat, his voice steady but filled with an underlying current of emotion. "After an extensive investigation, we have uncovered a deliberate pattern in human behavior. For years, humans have chosen to underperform in various competitions and challenges, not due to a lack of ability, but as a calculated act of empathy. A stunned silence fell over the chamber. The representatives glanced at each other, whispers spreading like wildfire. Ken continued, "This decision was made early in humanity's integration into the Galactic Union. The intent was to foster goodwill and reduce the risk of resentment. Rather than dominate, humans chose to step back, allowing other species to share in the triumphs, to build a sense of shared success." The murmurs erupted into a roar. Vexitara raised a hand, calling for order. "Silence," she commanded, her voice ringing out across the room. The chamber quieted, but the tension was palpable. Ambassador Zath of the Krill was the first to speak, his tone dripping with indignation. "You mean to tell us," he spat, "that humans have been patronizing us? That they viewed us as too weak to handle their true capabilities? This is an insult, a blatant manipulation." The Krill ambassador's words seemed to resonate with several others, who nodded in agreement. The idea that humans had intentionally held back felt like a slight, as though they were being pitted by a species that had only recently joined the Union. On the opposite side, the Sarians, a peaceful and diplomatic species, responded with a different emotion entirely. Ambassador Nail, her eyes shimmering with tears, stepped forward. "I see this not as condescension, but as an incredible act of kindness," she said softly. "In our early years, the Sarians struggled to find our place among the more advanced races. I remember the joy of our first major scientific win. It gave us hope, a sense of belonging. To know now that humans helped us find that moment, I can only say thank you." This sparked a new wave of debate, with voices raised in a mixture of gratitude and outrage. The chamber was split, a cacophony of conflicting opinions. Ken watched the turmoil, feeling both the pride of a shared secret finally revealed and the weight of the division it caused. Vexitara stepped forward, raising her voice to cut through the noise. "Enough," she commanded, her presence imposing. "What humanity has done is unprecedented. Yes, it was unorthodox. Yes, it challenges our usual understanding of competition and success. But before we cast judgment, let us consider their intent. Humans did not seek to belittle or deceive. They acted out of a desire for unity, a hope that by stepping back, others might find the spotlight." She paused, letting her words sink in. "This is not a time for division," she continued. "It is a moment for self-reflection. We have clung to the idea that strength means winning at all costs, that success is measured in victories alone. But what if true strength lies in the willingness to sacrifice, to support others even when it costs us our own glory?" The chamber grew quiet, the members deep in thought. Ken could see the shift happening, a collective reevaluation of values long held. Even Ambassador Zath seemed taken aback, his usual bravado dimming in the face of such a profound question. Trell, who had remained silent throughout the revelation, now spoke up. "This strategy defied my logical frameworks," the AI admitted, its voice tinged with a rare vulnerability. "Humans prioritized unity over individual gain. It is a paradox I did not anticipate, but one I cannot dismiss." Vexitara nodded. "We must decide how we move forward, knowing what we now know. I propose that we recognize humanity's gesture for what it was, an effort to create a stronger, more unified galactic union. Moving forward, let us strive for honest competitions where everyone competes at their best, but let us also remember the lesson humanity has shown us, that sometimes the greatest victory is not in defeating others, but in lifting them up." The council voted, and while there were dissenting voices, the majority chose to acknowledge the gesture as one of goodwill. The decision was a turning point, an acknowledgement that while humanity's actions had been unconventional, they had also been a catalyst for growth and connection. As the session adjourned, Ken and Trell walked together through the grand hallway, away from the bustling chamber. Ken glanced at his AI companion, who seemed deep in thought. "You seem quiet," Ken remarked. "I am recalibrating," Trell replied. "This revelation has altered my understanding of strategic behavior. I did not anticipate that intentional restraint could be so effective." Ken smiled, a mix of sadness and pride in his eyes. That's the thing about humans, Trell. We're full of surprises. Sometimes the greatest strategy isn't about winning. It's about knowing when to let others win. The two continued down the corridor, leaving the chamber behind. The revelation had caused turmoil, but it had also planted the seeds for something greater, a new vision of what it meant to be strong, one rooted not in dominance, but in compassion. And as they walked, side by side, they knew that the galaxy would never be quite the same again.